Jennifer Lee Chan, thank you so much for your time, Jennifer. Let me start here. To what extent was anything that happened yesterday a surprise to you?
I think the surprise was that they weren't 100% about keeping Trey Lance, because that's kind of what they said from the beginning of the offseason. It's just such a tough break for Trey Lance, who is, drafted as such a top pick and a lot of talent, just raw, needed to get a lot of reps to be able to become a successful NFL quarterback. And he just hasn't had the chance because he's been hurt. So it's, by no fault of his own is he in the situation that he's in now.
Jennifer, so what did the 49ers see when they took Trey Lance at number 3 that just never really came to fruition?
I think they saw a mobile quarterback. They've had Jimmy Garoppolo, who's been hurt. Trey Lance, before this had been very durable. He's a bigger, guy who's been in shape and he's fit and he hasn't had any durability issues, but he also hasn't played a lot. I think they saw raw talent and a guy that could move around. It's funny. Matt Mayoko, my colleague, and I always talk about how they watched that Buffalo game where Josh Allen was running around, and that extra mobility, that extra time in the pocket that it gives a quarterback to make throws really helped out that offense. And I think that's what they saw and wanted, and they saw it in Trey Lance. And, with Kyle Shanahan being such a good coach, I think he saw, okay, raw talent. I can have a chance with this quarterback to make him one of the best in the league. And unfortunately, he just hasn't been healthy. I mean, one of the preseason games in his rookie year broke his finger. That finger being broken affected him through his entire second season. He couldn't straighten his index finger on his throwing hand for the entire second season. Finally, now is healthy. Of course, the second start of his second year, foot broken. So then he is out for the rest of the season. He just hasn't had any reps. He has no starts, no reps. And really still a talented guy, and I think just hasn't reached his potential because he hasn't had a chance yet.
Jennifer Lee Chan, nice enough to join us from NBC Sports Bay Area. At this point, Jennifer, to what extent are the 49ers kind of waiting to see where Trey is? I know they gave him yesterday off. Presumably he would play tomorrow night, but do they have to wait and see what he wants, whether he can be on board now or if he's going to ask for a trade? Is that kind of what they're waiting to find out?
Kyle Shanahan said yesterday that, there's a scenario possibility where Trey Lance still sticks around. It's not like he's not going to be at the 49ers, and that's 100% certainty. So there is a possibility he does stay around. I just don't know what team is going to trade or offer any trade value for him when he doesn't have a proven history. And I think, everybody's looking at Trey Lance like he does have a ton of potential, and he's really well liked in the locker room. He does everything he can to be as good of a quarterback as he can. He does all the homework. He does all the film study. He's a great teammate. He's a great leader. He just hasn't had the experience. So, I think there's a potential for him to be a great quarterback still. The story isn't over for him, but I don't know whether it's with the Niners or not. But who's going to trade? I don't know if anyone's going to offer anything that the 49ers would be willing to take for a guy who was their number 3 overall pick of the draft just 2 years ago.
Obviously, all the eyes tomorrow in the preseason game are going to be on the quarterbacks, and definitely Trey Lance as well if he suits up. But which position group has your attention tomorrow that you're really looking at?
I mean, along with the quarterbacks, it's definitely the wide receivers. I mean, with Danny Gray being injured, maybe out, Ray McLeod, their returner, is out. How much do the other receivers step up? So Ronnie Bell obviously had the biggest amount of snaps in that last preseason game. Who else is their wide receiver that they keep? And then how are they going to manipulate the roster? Because you want to keep Ray McLeod and Danny Gray, obviously. So they have to be on the 53-man roster when cutdowns happen. Then after that roster is set, then they can put them on IR. So they've got to be strategic about who they let go. Do they let go of a guy like Willie Snead or Chris Conley? Those are veterans that have been around a long time, but they've been good in camp. But maybe they aren't guys that get coached by other teams. So it's going to be creative rostering coming up, but whoever steps up in that wide receiver, in those wide receiver roles, that's going to be the interesting competition right there, I think.
Jennifer, did Sam Darnold win the backup job essentially in that Raider game? And is it true that you've been rooting for him all along because of your USC connections?
I root for all players to have great success. Of course, he went to USC, but you look at the situations that he's been in, and he hasn't really had a supporting cast like he does with the 49ers, like anyone does with the 49ers. You know, you've got star players across the board at all the skill positions. You've got a great offensive line. When he was with the Jets and with Carolina, he didn't have those things. I mean, he started to turn things around in his last season with Carolina, and you saw it. He's a smart guy. He's got incredible arm talent. And I think part of his, you know, maybe the reason that Kyle and John have made him the number 2 quarterback is because of his experience. He's got 55 starts. Yes, they're not all wins, but because of that experience, as long as he's a guy that learns from his mistakes and doesn't do the same thing over and over again, that experience is going to really help a quarterback under center. So I think that's part of the reason why he's been successful with the 49ers, but didn't previously. Just that supporting cast is, I think, makes a huge difference for a quarterback.
What do you think all of this means for Brandon Allen, who's just kind of been sitting there as the 4th quarterback, and you know is kind of just been, everybody I feel like has been wondering, like, what has been the point of keeping him around? Does this news that Trey's the number 3 quarterback, is that good news for Brandon Allen?
You know, I'm not exactly sure whether it's good news or not, but I would think they roll with 3 quarterbacks, what they normally do. So if Trey Lance is up for a trade and he does get traded, then Brandon Allen is your solid number 3 guy who will be there as the 3rd guy in, you know, the rest of the practices going on. But you look at going forward, and that's the bad thing about the number 3rd quarterback position. They don't get reps. They don't get a lot of practice time. They get a lot of film study. They get a lot of experience watching practice. But that's why the story of Brock Purdy is so fascinating, because he really had no reps at all last year. And then he walks into the starting position and doesn't lose a game until the NFC Championship game. That's what makes this story so crazy. He would get like a handful of snaps. I mean, he got more snaps in his first practice back from UCL surgery this training camp than he probably did most of all of last year as a rookie until he became the starter. So Brandon Allen is a guy that also got a ton of reps at the beginning of training camp before Brock Purdy was fully cleared to go. Brandon Allen got a ton of reps. So everybody kind of wondered why. And hindsight is 2020. Now that Brock Purdy is healthy, he didn't get as many snaps, but they saw what they needed to see out of Brandon Allen. So that's a guy who could stay on as the number 3 guy if Trey does get traded.
Jennifer, thank you for your time. We know you're super busy. We appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you very much. I know a lot of people have been kind of pushing the narrative that this trade was a disaster, and obviously it wasn't good, the trade for Trey Lance. But it's even been suggested that somehow the 49ers, they could have had Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill.
I've seen this.
And Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, because that's what Miami got for those assets.
Yeah, but you got to remember, and you probably already know this, none of those picks directly went to those players.
Right.
Miami used those picks and packaged them, the picks they got, and they ended up with those players. But the 49ers, it's not like, wow, they could have picked Jalen Waddle. No, here's what those picks that the 49ers sent out. These are the players that were actually picked with those selections.
Yeah.
You had, of course, Micah Parsons did go to the Cowboys with that 12th pick. That was the pick swap. 49ers got 3, 12 went to Miami. Miami actually ended up sending that along to Dallas. Micah Parsons was selected, but Miami didn't take him. He had a pick 29, 2022 first-round pick. Offensive lineman Cole Strange was selected with one of those picks. He's playing for the Patriots, and he had a pretty good year, and their offensive line came together. So he looks like a pretty good offensive lineman potentially, but Cole Strange. Also pick 102 in 2022, linebacker Channing Tindall went to the Dolphins. They kept that pick. And the other first rounder, 2023, pick 29, defensive lineman Brian Brisset from Clemson.
Oh.
So these are nice players, but my point is, it's not like, wow, they could have had Waddle and Tyreek Hill?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the worst trade ever.
Yeah.
No, that's not the way it penciled out.
Sure.
That's wrong.
No, absolutely.
Grow up.
Yeah, if you're going to make that specific argument, absolutely not. Now, could the 49ers have used those picks to package
That's
for
fair.
somebody else?
That's fair.
Sure.
That's
but
fair.
no, absolutely. You're right in saying that that's not a fair criticism to say. You can say that, yeah, you helped the Dolphins get those guys. Absolutely. The Dolphins couldn't have done it without the assets gotten from the Lance trade. But no, you cannot say, look at those 3 stars that Miami has. Just put those stars on the Niners and you could have had that instead of Trey Lance. No, that's not really how the situation worked out at all.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you could have had a couple, like you said, Cole Strange. Sure, that's a good interior lineman. Absolutely, the 49ers could have had that instead of Trey Lance. Sure. Okay.
It was a bad pick.
It's one.
I mean, a bad
trade.
Bad
Absolutely.
trade.
And I don't think anyone is going to argue against that. There's no winning side of that argument. There's no way that you can argue the Niners actually secretly won that trade. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's again, and I understand why people are saying or are using this as an opportunity to say, look at the Niners. They're messing up. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, not as great as what they think, but let's just not forget now. The 49ers are still in a very, very, very good position.
Right.
And they still ended up at the end of the day figuring out the quarterback position, which, the means in which you got there definitely were not ideal, but at the end of the day, you got the guy, so you're fine.
John Lynch has explained today what he thinks is the most likely scenario for Trey Lance, and we've got that for you next year. Whitey and Watkins, Sactown Sports.
Whitey and Watkins, Sactown Sports.